President Yoon Suk-yeol is staying out of the public eye since returning to his residence over the weekend. Meanwhile, the ruling party is taking aim at the CIO for a, quote, illegal investigation, while the opposition bloc is heavily criticizing the prosecution for not appealing the court ruling and releasing him. North Korea fired multiple ballistic missiles toward the West Sea this afternoon on the first day of a joint exercise between South Korea and the U.S. The Air Force apologized over last week's abnormal bombing in Pocheon and confirmed pilot error as the cause of the accident, having entered the wrong coordinates as it reported its investigation results. It's March 10th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. Released after some 50 days of detention, President Yoon looks to be staying out of the public eye as he waits for the impeachment verdict that looks imminent. On Sunday evening, the leadership of the ruling party did visit the president. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol remains quiet at the presidential residence. Monday marked 3 days since his release from Seoul Detention Center, but a public appearance has not been made except for when he walked out of the detention center. This comes as the Constitutional Court's decision on his impeachment nears, with a possibility of it coming at the end of this week. The president is set to remain quiet and wait for the decision while preparing for his criminal trial for his alleged insurrection through the brief imposition of martial law. Any public appearance could be seen as a political message, and the impact could go in either direction. On the other hand, his new but what could be temporary freedom granted him more free access to key political allies. In fact, the ruling People Power Party announced on Monday morning that party leadership had visited Yoon on Sunday evening. Chair Kwon Young-se and floor leader Kwon Sung-dong visited the president at his residence for around 30 minutes, where Yoon thanked the two leaders for their good leadership of the ruling party. The news being released the morning after shows the cautiousness of the president and the ruling PPP ahead of the big decision, as it could be seen as a message. The main opposition Democratic Party of Korea was quick to criticize the situation, claiming that the politics has begun. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The aftermath of the president's release hit the political circle, with rival parties taking respective legal actions. Our correspondent Shin Ha-young explains.
After President Yoon Suk-yeol was released from Seoul Detention Center, the dispute between the rival parties escalated into legal complaints against investigative agencies. The ruling People Power Party has been pressuring the Constitutional Court since the release.
The Constitutional Court judges should stay firm and make the right decision based on their conscience, beliefs, and legal judgment, without being swayed by the opposition's unconstitutional claims.
The PPP on Monday filed a complaint with the Supreme Prosecutor's Office against Oh Dong-un, head of the CIO. It argued that the agency overstepped its authority by arresting the president on insurrection charges, leading to an illegal arrest through an abuse of power. Meanwhile, the main opposition Democratic Party has criticized the prosecution for not challenging the Seoul Central District Court's decision to cancel the detention. The DP and other opposition parties filed a complaint to the CIO against Prosecutor General Shim Woo-jung and called for his resignation and are even looking to pass an impeachment motion against him.
The prosecution simply repeated Yoon Suk-yeol and the PPP's claims, taking the lead in protecting Yoon, the chief conspirator of the insurrection.
In response to the opposition's pressure, Prosecutor General Shim said on Monday that his decision not to appeal the court ruling was based on due process of law.
The court clearly ruled that it violates the principles of warrants, due process, and the principle of proportionality. We felt that raising more constitutional issues by filing an immediate appeal wasn't the right thing to do.
Shim stated that his decision did not justify his resignation or impeachment, adding that he would respond accordingly if the National Assembly moves forward with impeachment. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Moving on, North Korea test-fired several ballistic missiles into the West Sea earlier on Monday afternoon. the first of their kind since the start of the second Trump presidency. This came on the first day of an annual Seoul-Washington joint military exercise. An Sung-jin brings us the details.
North Korea launched multiple ballistic missiles toward waters off its west coast on Monday. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said it detected several launches from Hwangju County in Hwanghae-bukdo Province into the West Sea at around 1:50 p.m. It added that the missiles may have been close-range ballistic missiles, while further noting that the country's military was closely cooperating with the U.S. while maintaining full readiness. The launches come following Freedom Shield drills on the same day, part of Seoul and Washington's annual joint military exercise. This is the first major military exercise since U.S. President Donald Trump's second term began in January. Earlier on the same day, in a statement published by state media, Pyongyang's foreign ministry denounced the joint military exercise as a dangerous and reckless act, and criticized the U.S. for its irrational choices that will contribute negatively to the security of Washington. The ballistic missile launches were the first since the second Trump administration took office. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
The South Korean Air Force has formally apologized for the accidental bombing of a residential area in the city of Pocheon last week, injuring more than 24 people. Reporting its probe results today, the Air Force confirmed pilot error. Our defense correspondent Myung-bo has more.
The top Air Force commander issued an apology on Monday over the abnormal bombing of a civilian village in Pocheon that took place last week. While saying he takes full responsibility, the general emphasized that such an accident should never have happened.
The Air Force will deeply and sincerely look back on areas where we fell short, and with utmost determination to make changes, I will make sure such an accident never happens again by correcting incorrect practices.
The Air Force reaffirmed that a pilot made a major mistake entering the wrong target coordinates before taking off. Two KF-16 pilots forming one unit input coordinates the day before the accident. Pilot number 1 called out the numbers and pilot number 2 entered them into the joint mission planning system. It is not known yet whose fault it is, but the latitude digits were wrongly input as 00 instead of 05.
The target coordinates were entered incorrectly, and the pilot should have checked them at least 3 times, but he didn't.
As preventive measures, the Air Force has vowed to strengthen the double-checking procedures, overhaul the reporting system, and enhance the management responsibility of superiors. Despite the accident, Seoul and Washington kicked off their annual joint exercise on Monday as planned. The 11-day drills include field training across all domains and are to reflect recent tactical changes in North Korea's military. Live fire drills have been put on pause due to the Air Force's accident. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The Korea Development Institute continues to sound the alarm over the economy amid lackluster consumption, construction, and exports. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin covers the latest assessment.
The economy faces exacerbating downward risks. This is the third consecutive month that the Korea Development Institute, a major state-run think tank, has made such an evaluation about South Korea's economy in its monthly report released on Monday. The rather somber tone comes amid ongoing sluggishness in the construction sector. The value of completed construction projects dropped from -7.4% in December to -27.3% in January, driven by sharp declines in new buildings and civil engineering, including infrastructure projects such as roads and bridges. And exports, which the South Korean economy heavily depends on, also grew sluggishly. While exports in February turned positive, shipments of ICT products fell on weakened semiconductor demand. by destination exports to China dropped because of lower chip demand, while shipments to the U.S. declined amid rising trade uncertainties. Domestic demand also remains sluggish as consumer prices continue to hover in the 2% range. The country's consumer price index, a key gauge of inflation, also rose 2% in February year-on-year. While this is a slight decline compared to the 2.2% growth seen in January, the surge in oil prices contribute to remaining in the 2% range. Last month, petroleum product prices jumped by 6.3% year-on-year, marking the second consecutive month of price hikes of more than 5%. The think tank also warned in its report that escalating U.S.-related trade conflicts are deepening concerns about a global trade slowdown, which could further heighten downside risks to the economy. 이수진, Arirang News.
Amid erratic trade policies, the U.S. says the 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum goods entering the American market will go into effect this coming Wednesday as announced. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun reports.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick confirmed that the new administration's tariff policies on steel and aluminium imports will take effect as scheduled on Wednesday. During an interview with NBC News on Sunday, Lutnick responded yes when asked whether the 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium would be implemented starting March 12th. The tariffs will not only apply to Canada, Mexico, and China, initial targets of U.S. President Donald Trump's trade policies, but also to other steel and aluminium exporters, including South Korea. Lutnick's remarks come amid shifting U.S. trade policies. Last week, Trump gave a one-month exemption for all imports covered under the free trade agreement between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, delaying tariffs on those goods until April 2nd. On that date, Washington is set to impose new reciprocal duties on countries around the world, further escalating trade tensions. Lutnick also clarified that tariffs on Canadian lumber and dairy products would take effect on April 2nd, contradicting Trump's earlier suggestion that they could be implemented as early as Monday or Tuesday. In a separate Fox News interview on Sunday, Trump reaffirmed that the reciprocal tariffs would proceed as planned, emphasizing that companies must manufacture in the U.S. to avoid penalties. When asked about the frequent adjustments to tariff policies, he insisted that businesses would have clarity, but warned that tariffs could increase over time. Regarding the temporary exemption for Canada and Mexico, he stated that he wanted to help U.S. automakers as well as the two neighboring countries that have significant trade relations with the U.S. Meanwhile, China has responded with a second wave of retaliatory tariffs on U.S. agricultural and livestock products effective Monday. Last Tuesday, Beijing announced that they would impose a 15% tariff hike on 29 U.S. products and a 10% increase on 711 others. The trade dispute reignited last month when the U.S. imposed an additional 10% tariff on all Chinese imports, followed by another 10% hike last week. China immediately implemented a 15% tariff on coal and liquefied natural gas from the U.S., along with a 10% tariff on crude oil, agricultural machinery, and pickup trucks. Despite these developments, there have been no formal negotiations between the two parties to de-escalate the trade war. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Building on decades of the Seoul-Washington alliance, the National Assembly has opened an official bipartisan group that aims to strengthen engagement with American lawmakers, perhaps at a time when diplomacy is viewed more crucial than ever. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo takes us to the site of the celebration.
A first in over 76 years of its history, South Korea's National Assembly on Monday celebrated the launch of an official bipartisan group of lawmakers aimed at strengthening interactions with the members of the U.S. Congress.
It is now time for parliamentary diplomacy to shine its light. I ask that you communicate closely and strengthen the alliance between South Korea and the U.S. I, too, as the Speaker, will support your efforts along the way.
Speaker Woo, in his congratulatory speech, shared his optimism for greater diplomatic endeavors between the two countries' legislators. Over 160 South Korean lawmakers have joined the new exchange group, to engage with 180 of their counterparts in the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives who are part of the Korea caucus. Joseph Yoon, the U.S. interim ambassador to South Korea, also highlighted the importance of cooperation between the two at the event. On the agenda this year are comprehensive trade talks, also involving major firms and think tanks, as well as group visits to the U.S. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
South Korea is poised to host this year's APEC summit in the ancient city of Gyeongju this autumn. And a senior members meeting recently took place to jumpstart preparations. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Yoon-ji reports.
Gyeongju, a historic city located in the southeast of South Korea, is where this year's APEC summit will be held in late October. As the country gears up to successfully host the event, organizers held the first senior officials meeting for 2 weeks up until Sunday, aimed at setting core agenda topics for the upcoming summit. Around 2,000 officials from 21 APEC member states took part. As this year's host, South Korea laid out 2 key discussion topics it hopes to focus on: artificial intelligence and demographic change, which includes declining birth rates and aging populations.
AI and demographics are issues that were never discussed at APEC. AI is something that can significantly impact our future, and demographics is another issue that we believe countries around the world will all have to deal with in the long term.
The executive director of APEC assessed that South Korea will be able to deliver a more holistic picture of AI's impact on economies, including innovative ways it can be used to create jobs. In an interview with Arirang News, he also spoke of how discussions on the demographic issue could help find answers to the question of how to ensure workforce productivity, despite aging populations. Regarding concerns over the current leadership challenges, he noted that preparations for the summit will not be affected by the political situation, adding that most stakeholders and experts are fairly confident that this year's meeting will be held successfully.
APEC tends to be isolated from domestic politics. So the other night we saw officials from the governor of the province, the mayor of the city, come together and support and demonstrate the city's dedication to ensuring that we have a successful event.
Ahead of the APEC economic leaders meeting, which will take place here in Gyeongju later this year, South Korea plans to host about a dozen more meetings, including the second senior officials meeting in Jeju in May, and the third such meeting in Incheon in July. Bae Yoon-ji, Arirang News, Gyeongju.
It is Monday, which means it's time to take a look at what has been happening in the world of sports. Joining us in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Neat. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Let us start with football and the South Korean national football team. There was a squad announcement earlier today. What can you tell us?
Right, yes, a 28-man squad was announced earlier today for the 2 upcoming World Cup qualification matches. Oman in Goyang on March 20th, and then Jordan in Suwon on March the 25th. Of course, Captain Son Heung-min is in the squad, as are Kim Min-jae, Lee Gang-in and Hwang Hee-chan. So is Hwang In-bom, despite being out injured for just over a month. There are also returns for Yang Hyun-jun, who has 4 goals and 5 assists in 7 matches in all competitions for Celtic, and Yang Min-hyuk, who's on loan at Queen's Park Rangers. Yang Min-hyuk was called up last September but didn't feature, while Yang Hyun-jun hasn't featured since the AFC Asian Cup in February 2024. There are some first call-ups too, with Gimcheon Sangmu duo, goalkeeper Kim Dong-hon, and left-back Cho Hyun-taek. Yonhap notes that 9 players were born in the 2000s, including 5 midfielders. South Korea could reach the 2026 World Cup with 2 games to spare, should they win both these upcoming matches.
And some players named in that squad were on the score sheet in Europe over the weekend.
Yes, that's right. Son Heung-min was able to rescue a late draw for Tottenham Hotspur. On Sunday, he fired in an 84th-minute penalty to see Spurs come back from 2-0 down at home to Bournemouth to earn a 2-2 draw, sending the ball right down the middle. Son didn't start the match and came off the bench at half-time, but it was Son who drew the foul from the Bournemouth goalkeeper to win the penalty. The goal was his 7th of the season in the Premier League in 25 appearances. Elsewhere, Lee Jae-sung laid on 2 assists in a 3-1 Mainz win over Borussia Mönchengladbach on Saturday. He's on 5 assists with 6 goals now for the season, and Mainz sit 3rd in the Bundesliga. Also in Germany, Jong Eun-yong, who wasn't named in the national team squad, scored the winner for Union Berlin away to Eintracht Frankfurt to help ease his team's relegation concerns. It was his 3rd goal of the season in 21 appearances.
And finally to badminton, another medal for An Se-young.
Yes, that's right. This time it is the BWF Orleans Masters in France. Anne on Sunday defeated Chun Yufei of China 21-14, 21-15 to claim the women's singles title. Anne came from behind in the semis to beat Gao Fangjie, losing the first set to win 20-22, 21-7, 21-14. It was the only set and dropped throughout the whole tournament. This meant a 3rd win in as many competitions in 2025 for the world #1.
All right, thanks for that, Paul. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
There are spring conditions all over the country. Seoul was as warm as 14 degrees Celsius during the day today, feeling like the end of March already. It will get even warmer tomorrow with Seoul reaching up to 16 degrees. But the air is dusty with this warm spring weather. The ultrafine dust levels are expected to be bad in the Seoul metropolitan area and Chungcheongnam-do province tomorrow and good to normal in other areas. Since the atmosphere is stagnant, air quality is not expected to improve until the middle of the week. Tomorrow morning, Daegu will start off at 3 degrees, Busan at 7 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 15 to 18 degrees across the country, a bit warmer than today. It will start to rain all over the mountainous areas of Jeju Island tonight, and this light rain will spread to the south coast tomorrow. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.